This is the Catch a Break podcast, the insider's guide to breaking into and navigating the entertainment industry. I'm Julie Harris Walker. You can find us at catchabreakpodcast.com and all the social media at catchabreakpod, as well as all the podcast places. The presenting sponsor of Season 3 of Catch a Break is Revolution Entertainment Services, bringing digital accounting and payroll solutions to the production community. You can find them at www.revolutiones.com. Catch a Break is also sponsored by Cachet. Cachet is proud to introduce Cachet Pay, the no-touch, all-digital, pays-you-back AP system that you've been waiting for. And finally, we are also sponsored by Orlando's Motion Picture Catering, who has been feeding Hollywood since 2015. In this season, we are going to be talking with different groupings of crew members. We want to do a deep dive on all the different positions and understand how they all work together. In this episode, we're talking about props and special effects with a prop master and a special effects supervisor. Here we go. I'm happy to introduce our guests. Emily Ferry is a prop master whose credits include Memoirs of a Geisha, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Gattaca, Alien Resurrection, Get Shorty, The Mambo Kings, Hoffa, Matilda, Ed Wood, Against All Odds, and The Right Stuff, Bessie, and Grace and Frankie, just to name a couple. Hi, Emily. Welcome.
It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
You know, I'm just going to want to talk about Grace and Frankie all day long. I love that show so much. We also have Mark Byers, a special effects supervisor whose credits include Race to Witch Mountain, Red Dawn, Halloween, Savages, Baby Driver, Mulan, Ford versus Ferrari, as well as the TV series CSI Crime Scene Investigation, Training Day, Legion, and Westworld. Hello, Mark.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
I am so tickled with this panel. I can't even believe my luck I get to talk to the two of you. So it is our tradition on the show for you to talk about your very first job and how did you get it, since we know everyone comes into this business from some completely different direction. So Emily, what was your first job?
My first job as a property master was on a non-union film called Six Pack Annie. And the advertising campaign was the smallest thing about her was the town she came from. And it was Lindsay Bloom with her many assets. And it was vaudeville. I mean, it was so bad and so funny and not funny. And I had married a property master, and a friend of his was producing the job, and called him and said, you know, do you want to do this movie? And Steve was kind of like, oh no, I don't want to do this movie. But he said, how about you hire my wife? And I wanted to be a property master, but there were no women property masters in the union. The president of the union actually said to me, you can't get in this union because you're a girl.
Nice.
So that was the 70s. So I was determined, and this film was non-union, so the union couldn't stop me from working on it. And I did it, and I knew nothing about what I was doing. I'm lucky I didn't kill somebody. But I survived it. And at the end, you know, the old joke about today you are one, you know, at the end of the film, I had done a movie. But back then, non-union was just short of porno. I mean, it was really crazy back then. It was the wild, wild west. I even stood in for Lindsay Bloom and drove a car too fast down Ocean Boulevard and being her understudy in her truck. I mean, I think I was the art director, the set decorator, and the craft service person.
All the things. How did you then get into the union? How long did that take?
It took about 7 years. At the time, the age of the average property master was 57, I believe. They were all men. And I had a lawsuit with the NLRB and with a nice Beverly Hills lawyer. But we ended up getting in through that open period in 1977 when there was an open place on the roster because the unions were not fighting fair, and they had to let a lot of us, the government made them let a lot of us non-union people in. And so I got in the union, and I'd been doing commercials for the most part all those years because they were used to having stylists. And they said, fine, honey, we'll call you. I'm a property master. And they said, we don't care, lady. Call yourself whatever you want. Just do what you've been doing. So I did commercials for years, and there they were used to having women, so they didn't find it outre. And I did a commercial with a cameraman who was up for a feature over at Chartoff Winkler. And right after I got in, he recommended me for the job. And he didn't get the job, but I did.
Wow. Yeah. I'm just speechless. There has to be a lawsuit to get you in to get the job. Well, we've made some progress.
That's how it was back then. It's much better now. There are lots of women, particularly in television. There are women effects supervisors. It's a different ballgame. It's not equal yet. There's not complete parity, but it's so much better. And I got so lucky because of that gig at Chartoff Winkler. It was a small movie, but then their next movie was Raging Bull. And they were going to shoot most of it in New York, but they were going to shoot some of it in LA. All the boxing stuff was going to be done in LA. And they called me and they said, do you want to do this? And it was going to be like a month's work. And I said, sure, that'd be terrific. Well, then it went on for months and months and months. And I ended up getting co-property master credit with the New York property master, which wasn't entirely fair to that New York property master. But nonetheless, there was my name on Raging Bull.
Wonderful.
And then, of course, everything was the sky's the limit after that. So I went from Six Pack Annie to Raging Bull in 8 years. I was very lucky.
It all worked out.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark, what was your very first job in the business and how did you get it?
Well, my first job doing special effects was a little non-union feature. I think it was like 1989. My brother, who is a prop master, I was hanging out with him and met a couple effects guys, and they needed some help on a show they were doing and a new trailer they were building. And I was able to use some of my talents to help them through. And they hired me on the show and said, we need you to work with us. And it was non-union. And then I tried to get into the union. And again, they wouldn't take me or wouldn't take anybody at that point. Worked about 5 years doing non-union movies and videos. Videos were big then, things like that. And then finally was on a show that went union. And then I was able to get in.
Great. Now I'd love to talk about what are the parameters of your job? Like what falls into props, what falls into special effects? How is it different from visual effects? Can we talk about kind of those boundaries around it? Mark, can we go first with you?
Yeah, so special effects is anything that's mechanical that you see happen on screen as an effect. Visual effects is something they create in a computer or composite things together or computer generate them. Everything you see that is like a real car exploding or a real car flipping and crashing or a building exploding or snow or bullet hits, things like that. Anything you see that's physically happening there, we're responsible for.
Like would it also be elevator doors or things flying around in horror movies?
Yes, all of that. Water, sinks, bathtubs, showers, stoves, fire, steam, wind, rain. I mean, it goes on and on. All of those physical things that you see that we're responsible for.
So things we may not think of, like someone goes to wash their hands in a sink, you have a part in that?
Yes, we have to make sure that there's clean water pressurized to the faucet. So when they turn it on, it works as normal and drains out normal and is drained into something safe. So there's not water lying around on the set or near any electricity. And you have to be very safe, conscious, even with something as simple as a sink.
Now, Emily, what about you? For props, I always think of that anything an actor touches. Is that the boundary or is it broader?
Yeah, that's a good description. Everything an actor touches, certain things that move, a bologna sandwich, a pair of eyeglasses, a rifle, paperwork, briefcases, luggage, cell phones, anything the actors work with is a prop. And I love working with effects people because often the jobs are so tightly connected. And if I'm on a feature, the first thing I do is go find out who the special effects supervisor is and say, hey, let's go have lunch or let's sit down in one of our offices and let's figure out who's going to do what and how we're going to do it. Because often, particularly on a big film, a film with a lot of action, the two jobs are so totally intertwined that you really have to be on an intimate, good level with the special effects supervisor.
Can you give us an example of, say, a scene that you would work on together and how you would break it down and pull it apart and figure out how you would work in harmony?
Well, like on How the Grinch Stole Christmas, even before we started shooting, the special effects supervisor and I had to sit down together and figure out how all this manufacturing and rigging was going to take place. Because we literally, every single thing on Grinch had to be made. You couldn't go to Target for anything, not the smallest thing. So as a company, the set decorator, all of us, we had to figure out how we were going to do that. And so I met very early on with Alan, and we figured out the best way to do it was to set up a shop on the lot at Universal so that everything could be made in-house, because we had so much stuff to do that there weren't enough places in town to get it all manufactured. I mean, just turning the brass instruments for downtown Whoville, for the Whoville band. I mean, making that tuba out of real metal, that Hui tuba, that was a huge deal. And so we ended up with a prop shop, and we did that together early on. And then throughout the entire project, the packages that Cindy Lou Who deals with that get exploded out of various devices. Well, how does that happen? We ended up making, actually my partner came up with a great idea of laminating some of our wrapping paper that everybody knew about, and wrapping packages that matched the regular packages in laminated paper so it wouldn't tear when the effects department was trying to send them through shoots at 90 miles an hour in the post office. So it's just, on films like that, it's constant. I mean, every day Alan and I were having a meeting about what are we going to do about this tomorrow? What are we going to do about this on Wednesday?
And all the things you have to think about, just what quality of paper so it doesn't get torn up during the action.
Yep.
So complicated. Mark, what about you? What would an example be?
Oh, gosh. I guess we worked close together on CSI with props, with all kinds of different gadgets they would come up with that had to do different things, that we had to get a prop made that they worked in the lab with, that then had to explode in an accident that they had in the lab. So we would build things the same way Emily would talk about. We would come up with what the director wants and what he wants it to look like and see, and then we would manufacture it, and then we'd manufacture one that we could do the special effect with, which is something out of breakaway material, waxes, breakaway glass, things that are safe to do the lab accident with, where we would send the pieces flying.
So I imagine you both have kits and a kit rental as part of your job. I'm curious, what is in those kits and how do you go about building them? And is it the same from show to show, or do you have to customize them depending on the job?
Well, I have a 48-foot trailer, which is actually just crammed, too much so, crammed with stuff that I've kind of collected over the years, stuff from my house, stuff from my first husband's kit, from the stuff that he had bought from other property masters before him. I have one prop box, which is totally unfunctional, but I keep it because it's from the 30s. Wow. And I wonder about that property master and what films he did and what his life was like, and I've thrown out all the rest, but every time it gets time to get rid of that one, I can't do it. So, and I really pride myself on being honest. I try not to steal things from the company. So I don't have as many watches as a lot of property masters do, because I always try to be good and turn everything back in. But nonetheless, you do get things over the years. When my father died, I took a lot of his stuff and put it in the kit. In fact, my favorite wedding ring that I give to actresses that I really like was my wedding ring from my first husband, the property master, who went to his prop box, and got the nicest wedding ring he had and put it on my finger when we got married. And I thought that was just fabulous. It didn't upset me at all. I thought it was just great. And I would take it off and give it to actresses that I loved. And because I have this talisman theory. I know this sounds crazy, but I think that, and I'm not a hippy-dippy tie-dyed kind of person, but I think that some objects have karma, or this kind of Lorelei siren call thing to them. And I would take this ring off and give it to an actress who I really loved. And if she took it and put it on her finger, it was like a good luck charm for her. And then when the movie was over, she'd give it back to me and I'd put it back in the kit. And every now and then there'd be another actress and one of my assistants would say, "Do you want to give the ring to so-and-so?" And I'd go, "Nah, she doesn't deserve it." Well,
I love it. So your kit, it sounds like it's tons of props. Do you also have a bunch of tools in your kit?
Oh yeah, you have to. You don't want to bother the effects guy too much and borrow his tools. It's not cool, or to go to the grips, particularly if you're a girl. When I first started, and it was so appalling to have a woman property master, people were so freaked out, particularly in the majors. It was inconceivable. I painted all the handles of all my tools pink so that the guys would stop stealing them, because it was a way to mess with me, to take my tools away. So yes, I got lots of tools. And then, you hire great crew people to work with you, because you wouldn't survive without your crew. You got to have a good crew, and they bring tools with them. And so you hope that unless it's something totally outre and bizarre, that you don't have to go knocking on the door of the effects trailer and say, can I borrow whatchamacallit? That's why you don't want to do a show without an effects guy, because anything that goes wrong, if you have a good supervisor with his good trailer, that's what a lot of cheap producers don't understand. These two trailers are worth their weight in gold. I mean, you can ask for just about anything, and I can go into my trailer and get it for you, even period stuff. And I'm sure the same thing is true with Mark. He spent a whole career collecting wonderful, necessary, marvelous things. It's such a small part of the budget. Don't not let him have it. It's what he needs.
It's so worth it.
Absolutely.
Okay, Mark, what is in your kit?
Oh, my kit consists of a whole lot of stuff that most people probably don't care about. But for us, it's everything we need to make a movie. We have hand tools and mills and lathes and welders and smoke machines and firing boxes and you name it. We can build anything. We can build anything on a location. We have shop equipment that we have in a shop. We have a rolling trailer that basically is a shop, but it has any and everything you can think of as a kit. And it's worth its weight in gold. And Emily is correct. It's without that, I'm pretty useless. I can sit and talk about it, but I actually need my stuff and I need my crew to do my job.
Now, let's talk about the makeup of your crew. In an ideal world where money's no object, how big is your crew and what are their positions?
Well, the crews vary in size depending on the size of show you're doing. But, for the most part, I will always have a set foreman. I will have a pyro foreman. I will have a shop foreman. And then I'll have several key gang boss for location work. We will prep everything ahead of time, show tests, prep things before we get to the location, just to make sure everything is done safe and we have enough time to do so. But a normal, just run-of-the-mill show, we would have 5 or 6 people. Bigger shows where we end up with 30, 40, 50 people. Effects guys between shop and set and 2 units going, sometimes 2 units in different states. When I did Ford versus Ferrari, we were up to close to 50 people, 52 people. We were shooting in Georgia at the same time we were shooting in California. And we have a huge visual effects, LED, green screen, all sorts of motion-based stuff with cars and actors. And, so it adds up quick and you end up with 50 some people on a crew. So it really depends on the show you're doing and what the needs are.
How about you, Emily?
Yeah, Mark said that beautifully. When I did Hoffa, we were in 3 different cities at a time, and I had to have crews in the city we were going to, the city we were in, and the city we were leaving to wrap things up. But you have to have always an assistant property master, at least one who's your right-hand person, and then at least 2 people on the set all the time. That's on an easy show that doesn't have a lot of things happening. One person has to go to the bathroom and you've got one person left alone. You can't just have one person on the set. You need probably somebody to help you, a property person to help you shop, and a person, hopefully a prop person to help you with all the bills. When I started, you could literally turn in a PO that said not to exceed $5,000. And you had to say what it was, and you could only do it if they trusted you, and you had to have the information of what the place was and their address and the person to contact. But now you have to have a quote from that person. And you've got a company that's got, 500 orders a day going out the door. They can't get that to you in time. So you end up having to sit on the PO, which kind of obviates the reason that you're supposed to have POs in the first place. And it's just the money end of it. Well, because of where you used to work, the money aspect of it has just gotten crazy. But
thank you for
with 2 people. I mean, it depends on what you're doing. And back when I was the craft service guy and the art director and I had one person with me on that entire show.
Thank you for digging into the money part, because that's one of my questions of, you come at it from an artistic craftsperson sense, but you also have to manage a budget and manage the money and do all that. How did you learn that part of the job, and where does that kind of sit with you? Or do you get to a spot where you can hire someone to deal with your paperwork?
Well, I don't fight with producers about money. I kind of learned the hard way. I got some help from my husband, but a lot of it I just had to learn myself. And you make mistakes and you learn. In a way, it was easier because there was so much less in the 70s and 80s before everything got so corporate. It was easier to do the money part of it because there was more money and people weren't so uptight about tracking it. In a way, it's like the monkey and the typewriter. If you give him enough time and enough paper, he'll eventually write War and Peace. And anybody can do it if you don't watch the money. So it's the producer's money. They have a right to spend it however they want to spend it. And we all have things that we want. The director has a vision. I have things that I want. The production designer has things that they want. And if you have a creative producer, they've got things like Bob Chardoff, rest his soul. They've got things that they want. And you have to have like it's an adjudication. It's a giant negotiation to say, okay, I'd really like to be able to do this, but then we've got to take money away from that. And they're on big pictures. I've done 5 or 6 budgets before we got to one that finally everybody could agree to. And then you have to track it and make sure that you don't go over. If you do go over, explain to people why and how. And it's a huge part now. It didn't used to be as much when I started, but now it's a tremendous part of making a film as a department head. The same thing happens to Mark. And if you can't do that part of the job, you're not going to survive because alas, I have an art background. I'm a very artistic person. I don't want to have to be worrying about what things cost, but that's part of the job. And if they're not going to hire the monkey, they're going to hire me, then I have to step up to the plate and to be able to do that part of it.
What would you add to that, Mark?
She said that very well. You do have to adapt. It used to be, just like Emily said, it was not as tracked as tight as it is now. And you still have to account for the money back then, and you still have to account for it now. It's just now it's all about the budget when you get started these days on these movies and shows. And you have to adapt and track it and be responsible. And you have to learn it as you go unless you learned it before getting into this business. And I did a little bit of that. I worked for a family business of contracting prior to getting into this and saw how important it is to budget, manage people, make sure the people, you pick a good crew that will mesh and get along and get the job done, as well as watch the money. As you have more experience dealing with it, I think the better you'll get. And staying on top of it, coming up with solutions to be creative and still stick to the budget is a key to success in this business, I think.
Have you come across a situation where the director wanted something or had a vision, but either from a budgetary standpoint or just a technical standpoint, you couldn't quite do what they wanted and you were able to influence them to go another direction? Have you had that situation?
Well, definitely that happens a lot. But sometimes if you explain things to people, they can help you solve the problem. That's where the negotiation part comes in. And when Danny DeVito and I were doing Hoffa, we had a scene where there were 500 extras all beating each other over the heads with truncheons in a riot at the RTA. And I went and bid rubbers, what we call rubbers, which are like pieces of pipe that look real, but they're made out of rubber, a baseball bat that looks real, but it's like a Nerf bat. But of course, it can't be the color of a Nerf bat. It has to look like a real bat. And normally what we do is we take a real item and we pull a mold off of it. And then somebody like Mark and his sort of wonderful craftsman people, artists and geniuses that they are, they pour rubber into that mold and they make a rubber bat that looks just like the real bat. But you have to take it to the paint department and then they paint it. And then when you do it that way, it's going to look more right. And the paint is going to not come off quite as quickly because there's special rubbers and special paints. You still need extra items, but that's the quote right way, unquote, to do it. Well, the bids I was getting were $30,000, $40,000. I mean, we needed so much material. We were going to shoot over several nights. You have to bear in mind that if you hit somebody over the head enough with a rubber bat, that it's going to start to bend and the paint's going to chip off. And I parsed it out every way I knew how to parse it out. I went to the producers and asked for more money. I did everything. And finally, and luckily, Danny and I are friends and we could talk about it. I went to him and I said, I just can't afford this. You know, we need like 1,000 pieces of stuff. What are we going to do? And he said, okay, I'm the director, but I'm also supervising all the editing. Go out and buy that foam material that you cover pipes with so they won't freeze. Go buy Nerf bats. Go buy pieces of plastic pipe like you hang potted plants in your kitchen with plastic chain. Take it to our paint department. Have them paint it. And when it starts to look bad, I promise I will cut that bit out of the film. So when you hit somebody with a piece of rubber chain and this plastic fake chain, and it doesn't look right, I will not let that scene appear in the movie. I will not humiliate you. I promise. And I knew Danny and I trusted him. So for about $2,000 and 2 days for the paint department, we ended up coming up with all this stuff. And Danny was true to his word. He's such a terrific guy. And if you look at the film on a screen and you stop it all the time, you know, which we didn't, you know, it was harder you couldn't do that as easily years ago. You can, in one or two places, you can see that maybe that's a Nerf bat. You know, it doesn't look like it's hitting somebody quite the right way that a real bat would hit somebody. But for the most part, the picture looks fine. And we saved $30,000. So if everybody, you know, puts their shoulder to the wheel and thinks about things intelligently and creatively, all kinds of things are possible.
Do you have a story, Mark? I just want to hear you guys' stories.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess there's the one that comes to mind that we did recently was in Ford versus Ferrari. There was a crash during the Le Mans race, and a Ferrari had to be launched like 300 feet down track while the race was happening and crash and flip amongst other cars. And that in itself is a feat to do. But we couldn't afford the Ferrari because it's period, and it's like a $9 million, 3 in existence car.
You can't wreck it.
We can't wreck it, and they wouldn't even let us get near it or use it at all. So we built lots of cars on that movie, replica cars, and that's still very expensive, hundreds of thousands per car to make that. But this particular Ferrari that needed to get launched, they couldn't afford. So we had to take a fiberglass mold of that car and build a frame and build it in such a way that we could fire it from a nitrogen cannon on a vehicle that we built that would drive 80 miles an hour in the middle of the track and launch the car 300 feet to crash amongst the other stunt drivers driving cars. So it was complicated, but the only way to do it was we had to come up with a way to build a car that looked like that car flying through the air and crashing that wasn't that car. If you stop it frame by frame, you can see the car come apart and you can catch different things that might not be period correct, but it was a way for us to have a period piece movie with a vehicle that was unobtainable. And we had to come up with a way to do it, and that's what we did.
It's amazing. Can we talk about, say, that shot? Can you talk about which departments are involved? Who all do you need to make sure is in on that shot to make sure that it's safe, that it looks right, that no one's going to be killed, that the actor knows what to do, that you don't light the place on fire? Like, who are all the people that are in the inner circle making that thing happen?
Well, it's obviously the director, and it's the director of photography, and where cameras are placed and people are operating cameras from. Stunts, of course. Stunts had many, many drivers in many cars, and all had to be choreographed so nobody was going to be in the spot where the car landed. The first AD responsible for making sure everybody knows what's happening and when it's happening. Producers to say it's okay to do this dangerous thing, and everything. We rehearse over and over and over and over all day to get one shot, just to make sure everything is where it's supposed to be and everybody hits their marks. But it's from the location department, from the ADs, director, camera, props is involved with everything inside these cars and the looks of all of that stuff. They're involved. Art director's involved. It's pretty much everybody. And even if they call it a second unit, we rolled with a second unit bigger than most movies' first units to be able to have 100 cars racing around a track at 100 miles an hour with multi-cameras. There's a lot going on. So you're touching almost every department, even construction, as a matter of fact, for that. We had to launch this car from underneath a bridge that they constructed. So everybody was involved in this.
I mean, that's a miracle.
Yeah.
To pull that off, and expensive, I imagine.
Yeah.
Now, is there any danger in either one of your jobs of being pigeonholed into a certain genre or a certain specialty, or do you want to specialize? How does that work?
I wish that sometimes I wish that one could get pigeonholed. I did the right stuff in 1982 about the Mercury space program. And I really thought that I would get all the space movies after that because I knew how to do it, and I'd done all the research and I kept all the research, and I've never gotten another space movie, and they've done a bunch of them now, and I've never gotten one. One thing that's so great about what I do, and I'm sure Mark feels the same way, is that everything. I mean, I was on a show where I had to buy horse condoms once. I didn't even,
sure, as you do.
I didn't even know such a thing existed. So you learn new things all the time, and that's one of the wonderful, exciting things about what we do. So I would love to be, in a way, to be pigeonholed, because it would sure make the second picture easier. But for the most part, it just doesn't seem to happen. I have done an awful lot of period pictures, and I think people understand that I know a lot about period, and I'm careful about period, and that I understand it. And so I think I've kind of had a direction that way. But in terms of always doing the same thing, well, also so many of my movies were weird. I mean, if you did Ed Wood, how are you going to be pigeonholed in that? There ain't never going to be another one of those, so that's one of the things that's so great, is you just keep learning all the time.
How about you, Mark?
Yeah, I agree with that. I've been all over the map, from horror movies to car movies to shoot 'em up movies, blow 'em up movies, space movies, scientist movies. So again, you learn all the time, and there's always something new that somebody wants that someone else hasn't done. So it's always a learning process, and that's what I love about it. We never drive to the same address for too long. We're never in the same spot too long. We never do the same thing too long. And that's what's so great about this business.
Is it the most fun job you ever thought you could have?
I think so. To get to do what we get to do and get paid and traveled around the world to do it, it's pretty cool.
Pretty amazing. Do you need any special licensing to do what you do? Are there any parts of it that you need special licensing or qualifications for?
Yes. To do special effects, you need a special effects card, which means you've gone through all the proper channels with the union. That takes many years to get through, starting as a prop maker, and then you go into a prop shop. You have to fabricate and weld and be on sets for a number of years until you finally have enough qualification to take the effects test. And to my knowledge, it's still the only test that's given with any of the unions, that you actually have to have the knowledge to pass a written test, which is hundreds of questions that takes hours and hours to do, about everything that you could ever dream of being asked by any director to do. And then you have to do an oral test sitting in front of, we call it the firing squad, which is all of the effects guys, the effects board. And they throw questions out, and you get grilled for a few more hours on that. And then you actually get your card, which is then you're allowed to do special effects on a movie or television without working for somebody else that has that card. The other thing we have to do for pyro is you need a federal card, and you need whatever state you're in card. So California has a fireworks and special effects program that goes in 3 stages, and it takes you a few years to get your 3 card, and then you have to log and work on the job training. Once you have enough logs, the state will look at them and let you take the next step, which is a 2-card test. And then you have to have that 2-card for several years. They look at that log sheets that you've done and who you've worked for, and they'll approve you to take the 1-card test, which again is the same type of thing. It's sitting in front of a firing squad of asking all kinds of questions. You have to do practical, and you have to do all the written. So it takes many years to get to that point. It's about a 10-year process. And then you're allowed to do pyro and by yourself without supervision of a 1-card. Other states have caught on to this. And when you go to other states, there's other states you have to get tested and licensed in. Some, the federal in your California is all you need. And others, you have to apply for and take tests in those states to do pyrotechnics in those states. So yes, there are licenses and lots of qualifications to do what we do.
Yeah, I don't think I mind that. I think
No, I don't
I
either.
need to be super, super safe.
I agree.
Now, can we talk about, Emily, food stylists? Is that just come under props, or is that a whole separate specialty?
It comes under props, and it's handled under our union banner. And in the old days, people never used food stylists. The property people would just do, open a can of ronzoni, whatever, macaroni, and do it that way. But it was a lot easier in black and white because things were much more forgiving, the imagery. And then we've become such an obsessive food culture that now food is very complicated to do. I'm a foodie, so I love doing food scenes. And that is something I kind of have gotten pigeonholed in a bit. I have a tendency to get hired to do shows that have a lot of food in them because people know I'm not afraid of it and I love it. But it's also, so many people now have food allergies. And I mean, I think probably people always had food allergies, but they were polite enough not to talk about it. Now
you don't have to hear about it all the time.
Yeah, now I can't eat this, I can't do that. And so you have to, if you have a dinner party with, God help you, 8 people sitting around a dining table, you're going to have vegetarians, you're going to have vegans, you're going to have people who are allergic to wheat and have gluten intolerances. And it's just gotten to be very, very complicated. So it's a lot safer and easier that you hire a food stylist who will be a property master or a property person, and they will work with you and your crew to make sure that the food is safe. And that's a particular, huge problem, particularly now in the time of COVID, that the food is safe and that everything is clean and that people don't get sick. And, all it takes is one actor coming down with salmonella and, the whole world shuts down. So I'm incredibly careful about food safety.
Yeah, it has to be beautiful, but also if they're eating it, and also if the scene's going to take 8 hours, and also if it's turkey legs and they're vegan. I mean, that's a lot of moving parts and challenges to overcome.
It gets very, very complicated. And I was once on a train with actors eating fried chicken, and it was a train in the middle of the night that was going back and forth between Chicago and Kalamazoo. And I started to run out of chicken legs. And of course, when you start eating, it's hard to control exactly what an actor is going to get and what they're going to take. And I thought, this is 30 years ago, but I thought I had plenty of chicken. And we started to run out, and I actually found myself taking other parts of the chicken and trying to take them apart and put them back together to make them look like the part of the chicken that the guy was eating. And I still have nightmares about this. I've knock on wood, I've never started to run out of food again in my entire life because this was such a traumatizing event. And we pulled into Kalamazoo for like the 6th time. And I actually thought, gee, if I get off the train and I start knocking on people's doors, do you think anybody would have any chicken?
The pressure.
There was no way to recover from this. I thought I was going to die. I've never been so traumatized in my life. I've never made that mistake again.
Oh my God. Yeah, you come up short like once. I'm sure that's the one time that happens.
Yeah, never forgot that. I was eating my liver. It was just horrible.
Now, I've heard with that things can vary by location. Like the picture car, does the department depend on what state you're in? Who's dealing with the picture car, whether it's props or Teamsters? How does that work?
It does. In New York, the property master still handles picture cars. That is no longer here in Los Angeles. They're handled by the Teamsters, $3.99. But we, as property masters, are still responsible for the license plates, usually the Viz bars, the light bars that go on top of police cars. Sometimes we do the skins that go on the sides of, like saying Joe's Plumbing. Sometimes the art department does that. And obviously things that are in the car, that Jesus on the dashboard. So we work intimately with $3.99, but in New York, the property master would still be in charge of all of that.
I feel like there's something I haven't asked the two of you that I should be asking as far as how you work together or how you work with a director. Do you know what it is? Is there something that you're burning to tell me that I haven't asked about properly?
Mark, are you burning?
I'm not burning. You've asked a lot of good questions.
Yeah, I love working with great directors. It is so I have been so lucky. I've worked with so many incredible directors, and of course, I love the ones who love props. Every now and then you work with a director who doesn't really care, or they want to funnel everything through the art department, and that's okay if that's how they want to do it. But I just love having an intimate relationship with the director and sitting down and talking about stuff. And what I always say is that, because obviously I have opinions, I've been doing this a long time, but the director's in charge. And so I will say to them, if I have a real opinion, like if we're looking at three objects and trying to decide, let's say between three pairs of sunglasses, if I have a real opinion, I will tell you. If I am ambivalent, I will not second guess your choice. And it's your choice no matter what. Because I did a picture with Barry Sonnenfeld, and he's the funniest man alive. He should have been a stand-up comedian. He literally is the funniest man who ever walked the face of the earth. And he tells a great story about the silent schmuck. And what that means is you take two. He says the hardest thing about being a director is making a choice. And some crew member, a department head, comes up to you and they got something in their left hand and something in their right hand. And they say, which one do you like, Gov? And you look at the two of them as a director and you're like, oh God, I don't care, or I don't know. Oh my God, what answer do they want? And finally you go, okay, the one in your left hand. And they say, perfect, great. Or they say, oh yeah, well, that's one way to go. And that's the silent schmuck. And I always tell this story to directors and I say, I will never give you the silent schmuck. I promise. I really want you to do it.
And do you have to have them decide every single thing? Like, do they have to decide every pair of sunglasses and every paperclip and every tie tack?
It depends on the show. It depends on the director. Some directors want to sign off on everything. All the minutia doesn't matter. They want to sign off on it. Some directors will flee from you if it looks like you're asking them too many questions. And that's okay. But then you have to be prepared to recover. If they haven't seen the sunglasses until the actor's wearing them and you're on the set, then you better be sure that you got a lot of other backup sunglasses when all of a sudden the director has an opinion. So, or God help you, the costume designer never got around to seeing them and they have an opinion. So I call it my rondelay, which is my going from department to department, trying to interface with people who could potentially really do me in at a later date, trying to make sure that everybody is on board, because it is, the French auteur theory notwithstanding, and that was certainly very popular still when I started working in film. The bottom line is this is a cumulative collective art. This is not, and it is the film business. It's not the film art. We've also got to worry about the money. And we all have to have a say, because everybody does have a say. And sometimes even the 13th lamp operator will have a bit of information that nobody else happened to possess. And you hope that they're working in a warm and fuzzy enough environment that they feel comfortable enough to raise their hand and say, danger, danger, Will Robinson, and save you from falling on your ass. So it's very collaborative. And you have to have, if you don't want to die, you got to have everybody on board. At the same time, you don't want to bore people to death and overthink things and make people crazy so that when you start heading to talk to the set decorator, they go, oh no, oh my God, there's Emily, and flee to the bathroom. So it's a balance you have to hit all the time. And some shows, everybody wants to, they're deadly committed to loving everything. And other shows, it's just like, don't worry about it. It'll be okay. And so you kind of have to adapt your personality to the mise en scène that you're placed in.
So I'm hearing a lot of collaboration, but not necessarily going for consensus.
Well, you want consensus ideally. I mean, that's what one hopes the collaboration will bring you to. But sometimes people just disagree. And then you have to kind of figure out who's going to be the winner. And in the end, hearkening back to auteur, in the end, the director and very possibly the star, particularly if you're dealing with a really big actor with a lot of clout and a lot of opinions, when the rubber hits the road for props, and also pretty much for Mark, I would think too, in the end, when the camera's going to roll, that's what matters. And if your costume designer absolutely hates something, but they're not there when the camera rolls at 3 a.m, and the director says, I will not give that briefcase to that actor, and the actor says, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole, you better have something else to give them. And unfortunately, the costume designer's opinion is not going to matter at that particular moment unless they're there to ply their trade there and kind of ask for them to be listened to at that point. So yes, collaboration, hopefully leading to consensus, but it's a complicated world.
So, Mark, I'd love to ask you, Emily, you said something about you hope that it's a warm and fuzzy enough environment that people feel like they can speak up. And I imagine, Mark, especially in your job, you have to have trust. People have to speak up just for the safety of it all. How do you nurture that kind of inclusive environment where people, A, can learn, because I think that's probably also very important, but can speak freely enough, especially to keep everybody safe? Yeah,
that's very important. And it's welcomed. For sure. Anybody and everybody, it's a collaborative effort for everything we do, from what we do to what, Emily having guns on sets. And if anybody sees something, please speak up if we're missing something. But we definitely try to keep a very open environment when we're doing any gags to make sure that everybody on set knows what's happening and why, what's supposed to happen. So if they see something that's not supposed to happen, somebody speaks up. And not all sets are warm and fuzzy. And sometimes the director sets a tone or an actor sets a tone that people don't want to speak up or say anything because of the tone that's been set. And that's tough. And you have to adapt to that, but never adapting to something that's not safe in any environment, no matter who it is. We always want to be safe, and anybody should be able to speak up. That's what I would say in a safety meeting before we do anything dangerous with anybody. Is I don't care who is afraid to speak up. They need to speak up if they see something or hear something that's not safe.
I think that can't be emphasized enough. I think as an industry, we've learned some very hard lessons.
Yeah, absolutely.
That no one wants to repeat. Okay, I think this brings us to our martini shot, which you guys will know is the last shot of the day. So I would love to hear either parting wisdom, something you really want people to take away as they think about their careers in this business, or also as you're working with other people, what is something really important that your coworkers do or can do that makes your job better or easier or more fun even?
In terms of what your coworkers can do, you're only as good as your crew. And a lot of property masters they don't want to be criticized. They're afraid to empower their crew. They want to stand between their crew and the director or the star. And I just feel that if my crew is respected and George Clooney's ready to turn to my assistant property master and ask them a question if I'm not there, that's wonderful. That makes me look good. It makes the department look good. I'm not threatened by that at all. And I think that it's very important to have good people and to empower your people. And when I hire somebody I haven't worked with before, I will say, please, I really mean this. If I'm making a mistake, tell me. I promise I will not yell at you. Maybe you got to give me a moment, heads up, and say, gee whiz, I think there's something we need to talk about. Maybe just don't blurt it in front of the director or something. But if you feel we're making an error, you might know better than me. Please, please bring it up. And in terms of what I say to people who want to get in the business, I get called a lot, particularly by women, and people say, should I get in the film business? And I always say, if you have to ask me, the answer is no. Because the business is wonderful and amazing, and I can't imagine having done something else in my life, and I'm so grateful and so lucky, but it's really hard. And it's very time-consuming. It's hard to have a family. It's hard on your knees. It's a very difficult business. And if you're not certain that this is how you want to spend your life, do not try it. And when you meet a young person, I was just working with a COVID PA who's going to be he's going to be a producer in 5 years. So smart, so hardworking. And those are the kind of people who are going to survive in this business. So if you're timid or you're not certain or you're not ballsy enough to step up to the plate, then don't try it. But if you know this is what you want, you will succeed.
Great. Mark.
Yes, very well said. And I agree with all of that. My crew is the most important thing. When I started in this business, the old effects guys that I would work with would always want to withhold information, not want to teach anything, them be the only ones anybody speaks to, meaning ADs, directors, DPs, things like that. And I always just thought that is no way to run any kind of business or any kind of airline because it won't fly. So I am open, approachable. I give all the information, everything from time it's going to take for us to set things up and build things. My crew knows everything and every meeting I've been in about it all. My foreman, my set people, everybody knows what's happening. I keep a big board in the shop or in my office. Everybody is welcome. They can look at what's coming up next, ask questions about when things need to be ready. Open and honest and talking about it has been a key to success for sure. That isn't the way it used to be done. And I think it's what needs to be done. And that is very important. And as far as getting into this business, I mean, Emily's right. It's hard. It's not for everybody. I enjoy it. I still love it. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I love taking things from a page, reading it, meeting with a director and seeing his vision and what I have to build to get it on film. And then it's preserved forever. You can go back and watch anything you've done. You know, it's really cool. And for a career, it's a good one to have.
It's great. And I love what you said about it really has to be a teaching hospital. That's what I call it all the time. It's a teaching hospital because you have to teach the next generation as they're coming up behind you. It just has to be part of your job because how else are we going to keep this thing going and keep it safe and keep the work at the caliber that it is?
Yeah.
Emily Ferry, Mark Byers, thank you so much for doing this. I learned so much. I know everyone else learned so much too. I so appreciate you coming on Catch a Break.
It was lots of fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Catch a Break. We'd like to thank our guests, Emily Ferry and Mark Byers. And special thanks to Alternative Rentals for their support. Alternative Rentals is a premier cinema camera house that supplies digital camera equipment to high-profile scripted TV shows, feature films, and commercials across the nation. With offices both in Los Angeles and Atlanta, Alternative Rentals is committed to providing their clients a 5-star experience in all budget ranges. And also special thanks to Cruvy, reinventing the playing field in entertainment worldwide. Find them at Cruvie, CREWVIE.com. Please check out our website at catchabreakpodcast.com and follow us on all the social media. Catch a Break is produced in partnership with Cashlight Films, Rose Colored Pictures, and the Other 50%, and is edited by Lasta Drakovic. Our theme music, Mantra for a Struggling Artist, was composed by Andrew Jocelyn. Thanks for listening. Be sure to check out our next episode where we talk about just what do a grip and gaffer do with a gaffer, a grip, and a director of photography.